So welcome to this video about how to name molecular compounds, or another name for it is the nomenclature of molecular compounds. So when you have a molecular compound, we have atoms that are linked together with what we call covalent bonds. And in order to figure out how we can get those molecular compounds, let's see if we can have a look at the periodic table. When you have the periodic table here, you know that we have on the left side, we have metals, and we have here on the right side, we have the noble gases, but we also have the non-metals. So the molecular compounds are what we call those elements that are receiving electrons in order to have their valence shell full. I'm going to put here a link at the top of the video, probably at the end, where I have a video about what are molecular compounds. So some of you can like that. So here there's a few things to keep in mind. We have here non-metals here that want to have electrons to cover the last shell. And what happens is that when you have molecular compounds, you have two or more ions, and they all want to have electrons. So what happens is, instead of having a metal and a non-metal, where the metal gives an electron and the non-metal receives an electron, here they all have to share electrons. So they all have to share. And because they have to share, we never know the proportion or the ratios of each of these elements that makes this compound. So let's see if we can look at how they are named. When you are naming these, what happens is that you have two words. The first word, it relates to the first atom. The second here refers to the second one. Now, how do we name them? So first of all, we follow the order that they appear. So the first one here, we have nitrogen. We have here nitrogen, which is great. And then we have oxygen. Oxygen, like this. Now here we have two elements, but it's not their names yet. In order to find the names, we need to realize that the first word, which is this one here, has the name of the element. But the second word here, the name is changed, and that helps us recognize that we are dealing with the name of a compound. So here, let's see what are the names. So if you look at the non-metals here, so I put the most common non-metals. We have here carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. We have fluorine, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. If you say, well, I don't believe you, let's have a look. We have here carbon. So as you can see, they're changing here. We have nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, chlorine, sulfur, phosphorus, bromine, and iodine. So we know that it is true. But when you're naming them as the second element of the name, we need to change the ending of that element. So here carbon becomes carbide, nitrogen becomes nitride, phosphorus, phosphide, oxygen, oxide, and sulfur becomes sulfide. So as you can see, we know that the beginning of the word is the same, so we know which element it is, but the ending are all ending in IDE. And then if you look at the halogen here, fluorine becomes fluoride. We have chlorine that becomes chloride, bromine that becomes bromide, and iodine that becomes iodine. So this becomes the second word we're looking for. So let's go back to our name here. We have nitrogen and oxygen, nitrogen here and oxygen. We know that we have to change the ending to end in IDE. So we have XIDE. So it's a nitrogen oxide. The issue that we have is that if you have here N2O3, we have nitrogen oxide, and we have nitrogen oxide here too. So this is an issue because we need to figure out, so I need more room. we need to figure out which nitrogen oxide we have. Because here you could see we have the same name, but we have 3 different molecules. So when you are dealing with molecular compounds, like I mentioned here, where all the elements you have in your molecule or in your compounds are all nonmetals, then you need to tell how many there are. So if there's one at the beginning, you don't have to put any prefix here, but here you have 2 oxygen, so you have to say dioxygen. When you have here 2 nitrogen, it becomes di, and then you have 3 oxygen, it becomes tri. If you have 2 nitrogen here, we have di, 4 oxygen, tetra. Oops, let's see if I can change that to make sure that we are having the correct name, tetraoxide. Perfect. So let's see. We have 3 compounds with nitrogen and oxygen. The compounds are all different, and let's look at the names now. We have nitrogen dioxide, dinitrogen trioxide, and dinitrogen tetraoxide. We have a prefix here that tell us how many of each of these we have. When there's one with the first one, we just leave it as is. So let's see what we've got. We have some of the, so here I'm putting the first 6, but there's only one of the atom, it's mono. When there are 2, it's di. When there are 3, it's tri. 4, tetra. 5, penta. And, oh, I forgot the little lines, penta here. And 6, it's hexa. That tells us with the word how many of these atoms there are. So let's see if we can go to the next one. I have here selenium and I have chlorine. So here I have 1 selenium, so I'm going to say selenium, that is good, but I have 4 chlorine, and therefore fluorine becomes chloride, and there's 4 of them. Tetra chloride. We know it's made of 1 selenium atom and 4 atoms of chlorine. Here I have SeCl6, or here we have 6 chlorine. So we have here selenium, hexachloride. Hexachloride, perfect. So what do we have? We know there's 1 atom of selenium, and we know there's 6 atoms of chlorine. So the name tells us exactly what we deal with. Now, I know this is the beginning of the nomenclature, but when you start chemistry, that's amazing. I'm going to look at 2 more that you will have encountered in the past. We have here a molecule that has 1 carbon and 2 oxygen. So what do we have? We have carbon, comes to C, and we have 2 oxygen. So what do we have? We have carbon dioxide. So if you wonder why, when we see CO2, it's carbon dioxide, it's because the first one is the first element, carbon, and dioxide tells us that there are 2 oxygen. Now, what happens if you have CO like this? Well, the first one is also carbon. And some of you may know how we call this one. This is carbon. There's 1 oxygen. It becomes oxide. But because we have only 1 of it, it becomes monoxide. So when you have carbon monoxide, it's a molecule made of 1 carbon and 1 oxygen. And this is what we've got here. And this is the basis of how we can put together the nomenclature of molecular compounds. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to give you a choice. You can go here to see how we put together molecular compounds and covalent bonds. What do they mean on this side? And on this side, I'm going to put a link to a video on how to name ionic compounds. So here you have a choice, so we can continue our learning. So on this, I'll see you. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I always put together videos about science. I even have on Saturday at noon a live video on science where you can ask your question live for me to answer. Anyway, On this, I'm going to go and I'll see you in either of these videos, and you'll see, let's learn something more. I'll see you on one of those in a moment. Take care.